evening, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you are joining us from. A very warm welcome to our today's webinar, Unlocking Global Cosmetics Market with ISO 22716, from regulatory compliance to ROI and sustainability advantage. My name is Titi Susanti, Global Director for Consumer, Retail, and Food Sector at PSI, and I'll be your host and moderator for this session. So today discussion we will focus on how ISO 22716, good manufacturing practices for cosmetics, help you turn compliance into competitive advantage, and also we'll hear insight into shifting consumer expectation and the rise of clean and responsible beauty. All right, before we start, let's go over some housekeeping first. All line will be muted during the webinar, and you can submit your questions during the presentation in the Q&A chat box. The webinar will be recorded, and we will be sharing the recording and slides with all attendees after the webinar. And then at the end of the presentation and Q&A, we would like you to complete the feedback survey before you're leaving the webinar at the end. All right. So we have two speakers in our webinar today. We have Amy Nguyen, a sustainability strategist, researcher, and writer specializing in climate and nature. So Amy works as a consultant with the environmental think tank, NGOs, research advisory firm, and early stage companies across the energy, technology, fashion sectors. Her work has been featured in the Times, Bloomberg, Vogue, The Guardian, and other global outlets. And then the second speaker, we have Wang, Scheme Manager for ISO 22716. You can see him in the video. Wayne has multidisciplinary background spanning science, business, regulation, and also cross-cultural communication, supported by 4 different master degrees in food science and technology, business administration, and global law, and also the interpretation and translation. Wayne has over 8 years in cosmetic GMP auditing experience, helping organizations strengthen compliance and operational excellence. All right, can you move the next slide, please? Okay, so here are the agenda for today's webinar. First, we are going to hear insight from Amy on key trends shaping the future of beauty and sustainability. And then the second session will be around practical perspective and implementing ISO 22716 to enhance quality, reduce risk, and facilitate access to international markets by Wang. And then at the end of the 2 presentation, we will have question and answers. All right, so I'll hand over this to Amy. Amy, welcome.
Hey Titi, thank you so much for your introduction, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. So it's great to be with you today to talk a little bit more about the white paper that we published early in the year, looking at sustainability competitive advantage for the beauty and cosmetics industry, looking at the opportunities for verification and auditing across beauty and cosmetic supply chains, and also the trends and regulatory forces that are shaping the industry too. An overview of what I'll be talking about today. So, of course, looking at those market trends and consumer priorities, and then thinking about why this is such a critical moment for the beauty industry and supply chains. I'll then move on to look a little bit more in depth into the industry's environmental footprint with a focus on formulation and manufacturing, and then touch on some case studies from the interviews that are included in the BSI white paper, and then thinking about how we can build the business case for sustainability initiatives what the top priorities are for the next few years before handing over to Wayne. So, to kick us off, an overview of the landscape and market trends. What are we currently seeing in a pretty complex geopolitical and economic climate? The beauty and cosmetics industry is growing. It was valued at 441 billion US dollars in 2024 and is expected to grow annually at least by 5% through to 2030. So quite significant growth. McKinsey and Business and Fashion actually reported that the sector grew 7% annually from the years of 2022 to 2024. So the outlook is really promising. At the same time, we are definitely seeing a demand for clean cosmetics and beauty products. Natural cosmetics alone are forecasted to grow from 642 million in 2022 to over a billion by 2030, underlining consumer preference for cleaner products with safer ingredients and knowing sourcing too. Especially that's happening in the UK. We've seen such a boom in organic beauty products as well. And alongside these sort of growth trends is definitely the rise of e-commerce. I'm sure that is no surprise to anyone, but it is estimated that online channels could account for 1/3 of global beauty sales by 2030. And here in the UK, TikTok is now actually the fourth largest beauty retailer. And I think it's really important to understand that with that, what consumers are looking for is trust and transparency and verification of the various quality and sustainability claims that brands are making. So if we could go on to the next slide. Looking a little bit more at some of the details of what consumers are prioritizing at the moment, I would really recommend for everyone to read the McKinsey and Business of Fashion State of Beauty report as well, because it has some really interesting CEO insights. But what we can see is that consumers are definitely wanting quality. And I think that's where like the clear link between product quality, innovation, and sustainability priorities that we covered in the report is so interesting. So there's definitely evolving consumer expectations around quality. Sustainability is integral, but isn't the deciding factor at point of purchase. I think what we're seeing is that consumers are increasingly scrutinizing ingredients, and they also want higher quality products. I think this again comes with increased access to information, and also increased education about ingredients and their impacts as well. So ultimately, at the moment, we can see that price, affordability, and value for money are definitely priorities for consumers. If we could go on to the next slide. So like many other FMCG industries, thinking about like the fashion sector as well, it's really a critical moment for the beauty and cosmetics industry. We're thinking about today's risks. They are only increasing, whether that's related to geopolitical conflicts, availability of energy across supply chains, which then has an impact on the fertilizer market, thinking about the abundance of raw materials and key crops that might go into ingredients too. So environmental impacts, chemical management, social responsibility is high up on the agenda as well. As we think about here in Europe, there are so many regulatory frameworks that are coming into effect, whether that's the EU CSRD or the CS-DDD, looking at due diligence across supply chains. And then, of course, we have things like extended producer responsibility as well. Alongside regulatory acceleration, there is, as I mentioned, consumer scrutiny about ingredients. So we found that almost a quarter of high-spending shoppers are actively checking formulations, and 63% of consumers from a research study rated clean beauty as extremely important. As I mentioned, geopolitical developments are exposing supply chains, not just in the beauty and cosmetic sector, but many other sectors as well. And this is compounding with tariffs and trade wars, so lots of external forces to think about. And of course, the climate and biodiversity crisis, two-tone crisis, that will impact the industry and expose them expose them to various different risks. So we're thinking about like the crossing of planetary boundaries and what that could mean for sourcing regions too. Looking at demands for transparency and verification, I think this is really important and will lead very nicely into the need for standards, which Wayne will speak to later as well. So this isn't just demands from consumers, this is demands from investors and regulators too. So if we could move on to the next slide. Our white paper really dived into some of the nitty-gritty of the industry's environmental footprint. And in the report, we break it down from the environmental aspect into carbon, water, and biodiversity, and making the case that the future of beauty and sustainable beauty will really be shaped by how brands manage their environmental footprint across carbon, water, and biodiversity, and how they align with reporting frameworks and the various regulations that I spoke to as well. So when we're thinking about carbon, of course, climate commitments in line with the Paris Agreement are super important. We've seen larger beauty conglomerates as well sign up to the Science Based Targets initiative for Scope 1 to 3 greenhouse gas emissions reduction target. And what has been the response in the need to mitigate carbon across the supply chain? So we've seen renewable energy adoption, engagement with suppliers, looking at opportunities for renewable energy procurement through PPAs as well. So an example would be that I've put here, Estee Lauder actually partnered with its top 20 third-party manufacturers to support them and engage them on an array of sustainability topics, including energy efficiency and renewable energy as well, which is really positive. So this is a great example of an energy response. When it comes to water, I'm sure we're all aware that the products that are used in the industry are extremely water intensive, but the industry response to this has been really exciting. So we've seen waterless formulations, we've seen closed loop manufacturing and a focus on recycling water systems across factories, which I think is great. And we've also seen the adoption of regenerative agriculture with a smarter use of water in the cultivation of crops. And then looking at biodiversity as well and thinking about the nature dependency that many of the beauty and cosmetics industries ingredients have on ecosystems across the world, especially in the global south that are more vulnerable to climatic shocks. So what's been going on? We've seen that there has been a lot more a sort of encouragement and attempts to look at regenerative agriculture pilots, which is really great. Some of the larger beauty conglomerates are also conducting nature risk assessments to understand biodiversity hotspots across the supply chain and alignment with reporting frameworks like the Task Force for Nature-Related Disclosures, and moving towards thinking about bigger macro policies such as the Global Biodiversity Framework. An example that I really liked was that L'Oreal is working with one of its brands, Weleda, and UEBT to ensure that biodiversity is protected in their ingredient sourcing. So they are working directly with suppliers on agricultural practices to really boost biodiversity and also ensure soil health, which is a really key indicator when we're looking at nature and the regen space. So looking then to the next slide, we dove into a little bit, if we could go to the next slide, thank you. Thinking about the opportunities for innovation across the beauty and cosmetics supply chain. And this is just a spotlight of one of the areas that we covered, thinking about how innovation is reshaping formulation, and then in turn, how that can be leveraged to mitigate some of the industry's environmental footprint and also create a positive business case for the opportunities for sustainability initiatives. So we covered various different things here, looking at bio-based ingredients, precision fermentation, waterless beauty, green chemistry, and alternative inputs. And really important to spotlight that innovative manufacturing processes and green chemistry can help increase efficiencies, energy conservation, and waste reduction too, aligning with circular principles. L'Oreal devised a green sciences strategy which actually targets 95% bio-based mineral or abundant natural origin ingredients by 2030. And I have a few different examples here from brands like Pi, who is using supercritical CO2 extraction to extract all of its biologically active compounds. I think there's the big lesson that the beauty industry is understanding that waste is values. So thinking about how renewable feedstocks can be used in formulations too. And Nivea's used like bio-based ingredients like sugar and cost oil derivatives for some of its sun care products line, as an example. And if we go on to the next slide, I have two case studies here. Within the white paper, you will find lots of interviews with different experts and companies. And two of those companies that we had the chance to interview were Zampler and LanzaTech. So LanzaTech is an incredible organization, and they basically have created an ethanol, which is essentially made from carbon captured, and that is transformed and used in fragrances by one of the biggest organizations in the industry, Coty. So a really exciting example there of how we can take excess carbon from the atmosphere and turn it into an ingredient that is essential to fragrances. And that process in turn requires nearly zero water consumption. So I think that's a really exciting example of how innovation and sort of like circular economy principles of eliminating waste and pollution can be used to turn into something good. And then the second example was Zampler. Zampler is a company based here in the UK. They are creator of Morrow. And what they did was they partnered with LMS, the skincare brand, to transform surplus borage meal that has been used for an ingredient within one of their products and is really protein rich, to transform the surplus borage meal into heat sealable sachets that can be used as packaging. So a really nice example there of something different as well, not just within the formulation but within the packaging. And I think there was also the really important lesson and learning and caveat that Alexandra, the CEO of Zampler, gave, was that for some of these technologies and innovations to be really successful and impactful, it's really important that they are integrated seamlessly into existing manufacturing infrastructure and can be dropped into supply chains to reduce friction. So if we move on to the next slide, a really key part of the white paper was thinking about consumers and customers are looking for trust marks, not only on sustainability claims, but very much product quality as well. And building trust in this requires definitely more than marketing and advertisement. It depends on evidence, transparency, and independent verification and internationally recognized standards like ISO 22716, which I know Wayne is going to speak about. We're definitely finding that consumers want to understand what they're buying, and essentially a majority of consumers remain really unclear when it comes to some of the sustainability credentials and communications, understanding what that really means, like what green claims are and what terms like eco-friendly, environmentally friendly mean. So the imperative to avoid greenwashing, especially in line with new regulations, such as here in the EU, we have the Green Claims Directive, and within the UK, we also have the Green Claims Code. I interviewed for the white paper, which has included someone from the UK Competition Markets Authority on effective comms and avoiding greenwashing in the industry using the Green Claims Code. So some great advice in there as well. But really important to stress that if consumers can't interpret claims, whether that's related to product or sustainability, regulators might become increasingly scrutinous, and there is the increased demand for third-party verification standards and audits. It also, communicating credibly and really clearly, sends a strong signal to investors and retail partners as well, which is, of course, in the long term, great for building trusts and relationships. So, penultimate slide, please. Making the business case. Many of the considerations I've touched upon have straightforward benefits for businesses. And that's not just in terms of like the financial benefits related to energy efficiencies, et cetera, but also the mitigation of legal, financial, and reputational risks down the line too, as we see so many regulations coming to force. But it's not easy to secure buy-in on sustainability initiatives, especially at the moment where there are so many competing priorities. So speaking the language of decision makers and showcasing ROI is really, really important. We've set out a few different things on how to build the business case here, but thinking about how that can boost customer loyalty and retention and acquire new customers too. Thinking about how high quality products, which are also efficacious and have good environmental and social sustainability credentials, can command a premium pricing. Also thinking about the positive brand reception and of course regulatory compliance. And there's lots of different examples. I think one of the standout examples was from 2018 was the report from Unilever about how its sustainable living brands portfolio far surpassed anything else within their portfolio. So there is a huge sustainability competitive advantage. And then if we move on to my final slide, which is thinking about how to chart path forwards and the future for sustainability within the beauty and cosmetics industry. So as we've highlighted in the BSI report, we set out different steps. So thinking about standards, safe and traceable ingredients, as well as strong partnerships with suppliers to engage them on critical topics and leveraging audits and certifications. I think some of the priorities for the next decade will be building trust through transparency, of course, decarbonisation and reducing nature-related impacts across the supply chain and the positive social impacts that that can have for the communities working across the sector. And then also thinking about scaling innovation responsibly and then verifying claims through standards and assurance, which I think is a nice way to tee into Wayne's presentation. So thank you so much for listening.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Thank you. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Depends on where you are located. Thank you for joining me today. My name is Wang, the Domain Manager of the Quality and Risk at BSI Taiwan. And today we are going to explore how moving beyond simple compliance to a strategic ISO 22716 framework can unlock massive ROI, protect your brand from the 14 million average violation cost, and build a verifiable sustainability advantage that wins the trust of modern skin intellectual consumer. Let's dive into the architecture of the brand resilience for 2030. So this slide highlights the core operation pillars of the ISO 22716 and how the standard help the cosmetic manufacturers systematically reduce the quality and safety risks. The first pillar shown here is the personnel and organization discipline. ISO 22716 emphasizes that the product quality depends heavily on the competence and hygiene of the employee. Staff must work within a clear defined organization structure with a clear responsibility and accountability. Regular GMP and hygiene training, together with the proper PPE usage, help minimize the contamination risk and reduce human error. The second pillar is the premises and environmental control. Manufacturing facility must design to support a clean and controlled workflow. This includes separating raw material, in-process products, and finished goods to prevent from mix-up or cross-contamination. Production area must also be easy to be clean and properly maintained to ensure a hygienic manufacturing environment. The third pillar here is the equipment integrity and calibration. Equipment must be suitable for cosmetic manufacturing, easy to sanitize, and regularly maintained and calibrated. Even a small calibration issue can create major quality and financial risks, including the batch failure or product recalls. At the bottom of this slide, we can see the broader strategic framework of the ISO 22716. The standard connects operational control with business objectives, such as the protecting supply chain integrity, ensure the process reproducibility, and verifying the product safety through the laboratory test and quality control. Conclusion: ISO 22716 extends beyond the factory floor into the supply chain management. Raw material and packaging components must meet predefined specification. Supplier must also undergo qualification and audit processes. Today, many global cosmetic brands and international buyers consider ISO 22716 certification a key indicator of the manufacturing reliability and supply chain credibility. Let's take a look at how ISO 22716 acts as a global regulatory bridge. While regional laws vary, they increasingly rely on ISO 22716 as an ultimate benchmark for good manufacturing practices, or GMP. At the base of our framework, you can see the global regulatory foundation. By using ISO 22716 as a universal standard, companies get a presumption of conformity across multiple international jurisdictions. This harmonizes allows you to serve multi-global market using just a single quality management system, keeping your operation highly efficiently. Now, let's look at how the three major global powers approach this framework. The European Union is the benchmark. Under the Regulation 1223/2009, compliance with the ISO 22716 is strictly mandated. To enter the European market, you must have a Product Information File, or PIF, for every single product launch. The US market is undergoing a massive regulatory shift. MOCRA transitions the US from the voluntary framework to a mandatory FDA facility registration and safety substantiation. The FDA is aligned directly with the international norms, using ISO 22716 as a core foundation. In China, under the CSAR framework, ISO 22716 offers a massive strategic advantage. It provides a pathway for animal testing exemption on general cosmetics, provided your document is backed by government-certified GMP compliance. To tie it all together, I consolidate the data table right in the center of the slide, which captures the current status across these three major jurisdictions. Conclusion: no matter which of those major markets you are targeting, ISO 22716 is the single key that unlocks compliance across all of them. When we look at implementing ISO 22716, it is crucial to view it not just as an expense, but as a strategic balance between the cost of value, the risk, cost of value, and the investment, proactive quality. Let's take a look at the green section on the left, which represents the proactive quality investment. Over a 3-year cycle, the direct certification fee ranges from £3,000 to £15,000, depends on the size of your organization. Compared to the cost of non-compliance, this upfront cost is highly manageable. The investment delivers immediate commercial returns. It acts as a global passport, significantly accelerating supplier onboarding with the major e-commerce platforms such as Amazon, EU, and opening the door to partner with the prestigious brand like Estee Lauder. Conversely, if you look at the red purple section on the right, the alternative is the risk, and the cost of value is staggering. Globally, enforcement is tightening. The average cost of a single regulatory violation now stands at $14.8 million, and the figure continues to trend upwards. If a major product failure triggers a global recall, a brand faces up to $600 million in lost sales and associated crisis expenses. Beyond the headline number, there is a hidden cost of poor quality, the invisible drain on the profitability caused by the product rework, material waste, and lost production capacity during the downtime. On the flip side, implementing a standardized quality system slashes the time spent handling complaints and investigation errors by 77%, keeping your operation lean. To tie it all together, let's look at the financial impact versus the mitigation chart right in the center, which clearly met out the protection of ISO 2716. A single batch failure, the potential impact up to $1 million. Mitigation, preventive through ISO 2716 in process controls. Regulatory violation. Potential impact is $14.8 million. Mitigation, managed through the continuous compliance monitoring. Then we check the major global recall. The impact is up to $800 million in the worst case scenario. The mitigation is by a robust traceability and the recall. Conclusion. The takeaway here is simple. While achieving certification requires an upfront investment, preventing even a single batch failure or a regulatory penalty pays for the entire quality system many times over. As we look at this framework, we can see how the ISO 22716 is being repositioned as a powerful driver for sustainability and ESG compliance. At the base, we have GMP Foundation, ISO 22716. By implementing rigorous documentation and traceability requirements and the safety and quality protocol, we build a data-driven floor needed for the sustainable operations. Moving up to the middle layers, let's explore how the standard directly optimize operation resource efficiency. Systematic documentation allows us to pinpoint exact source of waste. This leads to optimizing filling processes that reduce overfill and a clean protocol that minimize water usage. This drives to massive real-world number. For instance, Oriflame achieved a staggering 23,186 megawatt reduction in energy consumption by integrating energy and the quality management protocol. Whether dealing with the strict packaging regulations or implementing refillable product models, GMP ensures that the new sustainable material and refill environment maintain absolute product integrity, and safety. Finally, this backend operation efficiency directly fuels the top layer, verification, and consumer trust. The market has spoken. 70% of consumers actively favor brands that back up their safety and ethical claim with independent certification. With regulator heavily cracking down on the greenwashing, ISO 22716 audit provides the primarily audited proof required to certify strict EU and FTC anti-greenwashing regulations. On the flip side, the risk of inaction is severe. 76% of the consumers are highly likely to completely abandon brands that lack social responsibility or transparency. The conclusion of this slide is, ultimately, ISO 22716 is no longer just a compliance checklist. It is an operational engine that turned the ESG goal into a verifiable consumer trust. In this slide, let's look at how companies must navigate a landscape of increasing regulatory fragmentation and global risk. On the top half of the slide, highlights three major market shifts. France is leading the charge by officially banning per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, in cosmetic, effective January 2026. The EU has aggressively expanded its list of declarable fragrance allergens from 26 to 82, requiring much tighter formulation and labeling controls. We see a surging demand for indigenous oil like marula. This unique botanical ingredient requires specialized ISO 22716 quality protocols to ensure they don't introduce new contamination risk during manufacturing. At the bottom half of the slide addresses the darker side of e-commerce expansion, the rising counterfeit goods, and how a robust quality system acts as our ultimate shield. In 2023 alone, Interpol Operation Pangea seized over $5 million worth of fraudulent and counterfeit cosmetics worldwide. These fake products pose severe health risks, frequently attaining dangerous toxic level of lead, arsenic, and mercury. This is where compliance becomes a competitive shield. ISO 22716 certification provides a bulletproof traceable supply chain, allowing legitimate brands to absolutely prove product authenticity and the safety to both regulator and consumer. Conclusion. In an environment of shifting regulation and rising global threats, ISO 22716 is no longer just a compliance baseline. It's your brand ultimate security defense. So let's look at the facility cross-section. It maps out the exact real-world challenge organizations face when implementing ISO 22716, paired with the practical solution required to across the compliance finish line. The blueprint is split into two areas. Operational integrity on the top floor and the foundation pillar on the bottom floor. Let's look at the base of the facility with our foundational pillar, looking from left to right. Challenge 1, overlapping rule. In many standard setups, production managers often have the final say over the quality decision to meet the tight shipping deadlines. The solution: we must transition from the overlapping rule to independent oversight by appointing an independent head of quality and adopting competence-based training. We remove the commercial pressure from the safety decision. Challenge 2: cross-contamination risk. The issue legacy plan lays out with the poor material and personnel flow create a high-risk intersection points. The solution: implement sanitary design and logic flow mapping. This means explicitly design the dedicated hygiene zone and one-way material path to completely isolate contaminants. Challenge 3: time-based lock. Rely on the rigid calendar schedule for the equipment maintenance often misses earlier signs of failure, leading to a batch contamination. The solution: move to the predictive conduction-based maintenance. Transition to diagnostic CMMS system with mandatory GMP data fields to address equipment wear before failure occurs. Now we look at the top floor, focusing on the operation integrity right across the production line. Challenge 4: shadow spreadsheet. The proliferation of unvalidated Excel file and informal clipboards creates severe data integrity gap. The solution: eliminating shadow spreadsheet. We replace this unvalidated file with 21 CFR Part 11 compliant electronic batch record (EBR) to capture the iron-clad automatic data. Challenge 5: temperature fixes. Patch up the equipment issue with a short-term band-aid remedies rather than addressing a systematic flaws. The solution: drive a structural root cause analysis approach. Use the 5 why or fishbone diagram. Right next to this is the we employee TOC-based cleaning validation protocol, ensuring strict formulas or allergen are completely cleaned between batches. The last challenge is supplier drift. Raw material quality slowly shifting or deviating from the specification over time. The solution: enforce rigorous material quarantine and vendor qualification. This requires strict physical quarantine areas for unreleased stock and mandatory periodical on-site supplier audits. Finally, anchoring the entire line is our traceability solution, annual mock recalls. This ensures the system can track any batch backward to your raw material or forward to your customer within hours. Conclusion: the takeaway from this preprint is clear. ISO 22716 is not just a static paperwork exercise. True compliance means you systematically replace every single operational blind spot with the technical interlock shown right here on this floor. As we look at this framework, we see the ISO 22716 not just as a certification, but as a complete architecture of excellence. By looking through the lens of Mary Kay, L'Oreal, and growth-oriented SME, we can see exactly how standards translate into a global seal of safety. Everything starts at the base with the strategic implementation. Take Mary Kay's 100 million R3 facility as an example. By investing in state-of-the-art infrastructure, they have ensured a global contamination-free production flow from the ground up. We are replacing the old-school manual log with the high-precision digital monitoring and automatic color check to ensure the absolute consistency across every single batch. Quality is a mindset. By embedding accountability into the organizational structure, what Mary Kay calls the golden rule, compliance becomes a shared responsibility rather than just a checklist. Once the foundation is solid, the numbers speak for themselves. For SME in hubs like Bangalore, modernization operations through the GMP has led to a massive 45% drop in product compliance, complaints. L'Oreal journey shows that the ISO 22716 provides the operations stability required to scale, supporting a 12% sustained growth in the global production. Ultimately, this leads to the peak, the global outcomes. Certification acts as a shield of safety, facilitating seamless global market entry. It is the prerequisite that allows brands to expand confidently into a highly regulated region like the EU or the Middle East. Finally, let's look at the data table on the right. Whether you are the global leader like L'Oreal, managing 7 billion units with the Cobatics, or you are an industry leader like Mary Kay, producing 1 million units daily, or you are the export-oriented SME leveraging digitized inventory. ISO 22716 is a common agent driven your success. So let's come to my last slide. To wrap up our presentation, let's look at the ultimate blueprint for the end of this decade. ISO 22716 as the architecture of the brand resilience 2030. The entire structure stands on the foundation of strategic survival, driven by 3 concrete pillars at the base. The standard of the survival, protecting your brand against high-stake product liability. The economy engine, minimize the cost of non-compliance to optimize ROI smoothly across the EU, US, and China. Ethical infrastructure, providing the critical framework required to integrate seamlessly into a sustainable circular economy. Building upon the survival foundation are the 3 2030 strategic layers designed to answer the emerging market forces. We can make them direct to our market trend table on the right. Trend 1. Skin intellectualism. Consumers are highly educated and demand verified ingredient transparency. Sustainability, substantiated safety. Our focus centers heavily on the Chapter 9 laboratory control to back up every brand claim with ironclad lab data. Personalized biotech and omni-channel growth. Highly value small batch complexity paired with the complex global logistics. Distribution resilience. We achieve this through the iterative validation and tight digital monitoring to mitigate supply chain disruption. Trend 3. Green claim scrutiny. Global regulators are actively cracking down on vague environmental marketing. Operation transparency. This requires a clean, integrated ESG and sustainability report direct tied to our shop floor data. In summary, ISO 22716 is no longer just a manual of the static procedure. It is comprehensive strategic architecture required to navigate a complex future. It is the single ultimate foundation of the brand resilience and the primary guarantor of the safety, high growth future of our global enterprise. So this concludes my presentation today. Thank you all of you, your time, your attention. I hope you found this information useful and insightful. So this is the
sorry.
Okay. Go ahead, TT. No problem.
No
problem.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Wayne. I guess you also have something else to share. I think Amy already mentioned about the white paper of our white paper, but she hasn't showed the website, right? So maybe someone can copy this link and then put it in
the link in the chat box.
Chat.
No problem.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much again, Wayne, and also Amy, for your insightful presentation. May I call Amy to show your video? Thank you. So now we can start the Q&A session. We have a few questions in the Q&A box. Let me just read it. Okay, so we have a question for Wayne. This is from the small, medium, and enterprise company. She asked, how can we justify the cost of full ISO 22716 certification when they are just trying to get their first 5 products into the market? Is this ISO 22716 is per product, or is it like for the whole production of companies? She asked this question to Wayne.
Okay, thank you, Titi. I think this is a very excellent question. So as I mentioned, the certification cost is high, around the £3,000 to £15,000 per year. But if you look at I think even though the cost is high, but compared to the non-conformity or any recall, like a recall, maybe the 1 million, you will spend the 1 million cost for your product recall. So I think the certification, the fee is nothing compared to this one. So it is affordable, so you can manage it. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. I think there's also the follow-up of the question is whether this certification include the whole products, or is it only depending on what kind of products they want to include in the certificate?
I think the when we calculate the mandate, the mandate of certification, which depends on the number of the effective employee of your company. So for the product wise, we don't count it as a mandate. So I think it's okay if you have more than one product, you can add into your certificate scope. That's no problem.
Okay, so the certification scope and the cost will be based on how big the company is, right? How many exactly. Employees in the company, and not based on how many products you are producing in the company. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. But it's better for you just put all your cosmetic product all together at the initial assessment, because each time if you want to add one more product, that will be the extension. So that will be the charge. So if at the beginning you put all the product together, so we just count you the effective your employee number. So that will be your cost.
Yeah, the more the merrier, right?
Yeah. The more the merrier. Exactly.
All right. And then I also have a question regarding the regulation changing the relationship between the product quality, sustainability claim, and consumer trust in the beauty industry. Because, you know, there are always like uh, regulation change in different continent, like in Europe or in the US, like Wayne mentioned about the modernization cosmetic regulation act in the US, which was only introduced in 2022, if I'm not mistaken. And also there are a few other regulation in Europe. So uh, how is the regulation changing the relationship between the product quality, sustainability claim, and consumer trust in the beauty industry? So maybe Amy, you can answer that question.
Yeah, sure. I think Wayne's highlighted so many additional regulations as well, alongside my presentation. I think the main thing is that it's happening really quickly. I mean, people often refer to this in Europe as a tsunami of regulation, but what we're really seeing across the board is that sustainability isn't a nice to have, whether it's the environmental or social side. It is moving from a voluntary commitment to a compliance requirement. And I think that is a really positive thing. I know that Wayne touched upon like the regulations regarding PFAS and safe chemicals. I think the impact that this can have, we're not just talking about the environment, but we're talking about society as a whole, is really promising. Another way that I think regulation is shaping things in Europe when we think about like due diligence, so really incorporating sort of the social side of ESG, which can sometimes be forgotten because the social side is a little bit harder to measure than CO2 emissions and things like that. So I think that's really great. And we've seen the developments of the EUDR, so putting deforestation on the agenda as well, which I think will be really critical for helping businesses consider their nature-related impacts across their supply chain as well. And then, of course, in line with that, we're seeing that regulation is pushing consumers to demand proof. They just don't want like marketing and advertising. They want credible claims, as Wayne also highlighted. And that's great where we've seen like the EU Green Claims Directive. So yeah, I think that it really highlights that the pace at which regulation is shifting is showing that like supply chain transparency will not be optional, and the long-term risks of not complying will be profound.
Thank you, Amy. You mentioned about the green claim just now, right? And it's also tied to usually the greenwashing act regular policy in Europe, right? Are there a lot of like cosmetic companies in Europe who's been you know uh, called up and then published in the in publicly in the newsletter articles and things like news article, things like that? Sorry, newspaper or something like that. Is there any like specific big brands who got into this greenwashing claim?
Yes, so from a beauty standpoint, I am not sure of any specific large examples, but I know that some of the key risks for beauty and cosmetic brands are not only sort of like the technical information, but very much the imagery side of things as well.
Oh,
Sort of like the thresholds for, say, sourced natural or organic ingredients and things like that. But we're seeing in other sectors, there are very much repercussions. The fashion sector is a brilliant example of that, where brands go under investigation. They are either fined, some of their advertising is banned. We're seeing that a lot as well in Europe, especially in Italy, some larger cases on that, as well as in the UK. So yeah, we are seeing penalties come into effect. But I think some of the key risks for companies in the beauty sector is definitely around like imaging, like imagery and advertising, and sort of like overemphasizing sort of a green narrative when there isn't one.
great, thank you. while we are still on the discussing about regulation, I have a question around the Modernization of Cosmetic Regulation Act. So how does this ISO 22716 specifically help with the Modernization of Cosmetic Regulation Act new serious and adverse event reporting requirements for 2026? So I guess Wayne, maybe you can help to answer this question.
Okay, no problem. Let me see. Okay, I think that's an excellent question. I think on the chapter 14 of the ISO 27716 focuses especially on the compliance recall. So if you have the robust GMP system, you already have the traceability infrastructure to identify to exactly which batch or which raw material or which operator was involved in the reported incident. So this allow you to respond to the FDA with the critical 15-day window with the data. So it turns the potential crisis into the manageable event. Yep. So I hope this answered your question.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. And I also have another question in the chat box. Okay. Can BSI provide this audit? Is there any accreditation? Okay, so maybe I don't know when you can answer that question, or I can also answer that question on the accreditation.
Yeah, I think we have already provided the ISO 22716 certification for a long time. So there's no problem. We can execute this audit, no problem. So maybe TT, you want to supplement?
Okay, yeah, maybe I can add on that. So for ISO 22716 is a guidance standard. So it's not actually it's not a certification standard. So there's no accreditation for any certification body. They cannot have the accreditation for this standard because it is a guidance standard instead of certification standard. So I hope that answered the question. And I think there is another one question. Another one question. Hang on. Okay. So, which emerging innovation or sustainability strategies do you believe will have the biggest impact on reducing the beauty industry's environmental footprint over the next 5 to 10 years? Can you help answer?
Yeah, of course. I think
Thank you.
we're at a really critical time. Of course, we've only got 4.5 years left to which many climate goals are set. So I think that period of time provides a really great runway for businesses and organizations to sort of, if they haven't already, set their sustainability strategies in place. I think critical to all of this is collaboration. I know that sometimes that can be a buzzword, but with some of the case studies that I showed you, I think partnering with not just innovators, but with actors across the supply chain will be so critical. Engaging suppliers on energy related issues, understanding their dependencies, where they need support, where they need financing, especially for things like decarbonisation, manufacturing operations and things like that. That's expensive. Manufacturers might not be able to do that on their own. They might need help from big beauty conglomerates as well. So it's great to see that some of them are engaging with their suppliers on that. I think definitely a focus on circularity, as we saw throughout the case study examples as well, applying circular principles about eliminating waste, finding value in in imagining old materials, whether that's in formulations, whether that's in packaging, will be really important as well, as there's such a risk at the moment of losing resources, especially with sort of geopolitical tensions. Yeah, I think that will be really important. I think another area as well, which we're seeing is really positive and exciting, not just from an environmental aspect, but also from a social standpoint, is regenerative agriculture and the focus on sort of nature positive sourcing, thinking about how sort of raw material extraction and like cultivating of crops can be done in a way that works in symbiosis with nature, and the positive impact that it can have on farmers and growing communities that are working on that. And then also, of course, a really exciting area, I think, to really enhance trust is around digital traceability and supply chain traceability as well. So giving accelerated visibility of ingredient sourcing, supply chain operations, and things like that will not only help to sort of consider environmental hotspots, but also look at social due diligence as well and verify product quality and sustainability claims.
Right. Thank you so much. That was our last question. And I think we are over time, actually. So sorry about that. So thank you once again, Amy and Wayne, for sharing your expertise with us today. And thank you to all participants for joining and your active engagement. So don't forget to download our white paper around foundation for the sustainable beauty and cosmetic industry. Thank you so much again, and have a great day, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.